Please, close your eyes for just a moment. Try to remember the unmistakable scent of roasted chestnuts on a crisp autumn evening, or the sharp metallic smell of a two-stroke Trabant engine echoing through a quiet neighborhood block. We are traveling back in time today, returning to the Hungary of the 1970s and 1980s. It was a world that felt incredibly vast, a time when our neighborhoods were our entire universe, and the rules of life were written not in strict law books, but in the unwritten codes of community and common sense. Today, we are going to explore 20 completely ordinary things from our past that would be considered entirely unacceptable, dangerous, or even strictly illegal in today's modern world. And as we reach the end of our journey, I will remind you of the most touching, beautiful freedom we possessed, a freedom that no modern technology could ever replace. Time simply flowed differently back then. It moved slower, with a quiet, deliberate rhythm that lacked the frantic rushing of our modern days. Waiting was an essential part of life, whether it was waiting years for a telephone line to be installed, waiting months for a new car, or simply waiting by the mailbox for a handwritten letter from a dear friend. This waiting did not make us poorer. Instead, it made the arrival of those moments incredibly precious. We often hear the myth that because we lacked modern technology and endless consumer goods, our lives were somehow emptier. But you and I know the absolute truth. Life was immensely richer in genuine human connection. We gathered in small presso cafes over strong black coffee. We talked over the garden fences, and we looked each other in the eyes. We lived in a world where trust was given freely and where communities raised children together. The things we did back then might seem shocking to modern sensibilities, but they were the very rituals that made our hearts beat stronger and our spirits soar higher. And now let us remember the long, sun-drenched summer drives down to Lake Balaton in a packed Trabant or Lada. Can you still feel the unmistakable vibration of that small engine traveling through the synthetic leather seats? Back in the 1970s and 1980s, the concept of a seatbelt in the back seat was practically science fiction. We would pile into the back of the car, sometimes 3 or 4 children squished together, our bare legs sticking to the hot upholstery in the July heat. There were no child safety seats, no strict regulations holding us down. We were completely free to bounce around, hang our heads out the windows, and feel the warm wind roaring through our hair as we sang songs all the way to the water. The smell of gasoline and exhaust fumes mixed with the scent of our mother's sunscreen and the anticipation of summer freedom. Today, a police officer would immediately pull over a car packed with unbuckled children, and the driver would face severe fines. But back then, it was just the normal way families traveled. We survived the bumps and the sharp turns, held together not by nylon straps, but by the sheer joy of the journey and the trusting arms of our older siblings. It was a chaotic, dangerous, yet beautifully liberating way to experience the world rushing by. Let us walk down to the corner grocery store, the beloved local ABC. Imagine being an 8 or 9-year-old child clutching a handwritten note from your father and a few heavy metallic coins in your small hand. You would walk up to the cashier in her crisp blue smock, accompanied by the smell of freshly ground coffee and warm bread. Without a single blink of hesitation, you would hand over the money and ask for a pack of Kossuth or Symphonia cigarettes and perhaps a brown glass bottle of Kubányai beer. The cashier would smile, stamp the receipt, hand over the tobacco and alcohol to a child, and wish you a wonderful afternoon. Nobody questioned it. Nobody called the authorities, and nobody worried about moral decay. It was simply a neighbourly transaction, a sign that you were trusted with grown-up responsibilities. Today, selling tobacco or alcohol to a minor is a strict criminal offence, guarded by ID checks and security cameras. But in our youth, it was a proud rite of passage. Carrying that pack of cigarettes home made you feel incredibly mature, a vital helper in the daily machinery of family life, bound by a deep, unspoken trust between the local shopkeeper and your parents. Do you recall the iconic blue cast-iron wells, the beloved Kekut, standing proudly on almost every street corner in the countryside and city outskirts? On a blistering hot August afternoon, after playing football in the dust for hours, those blue pumps were our absolute salvation. We would run up, press down on the heavy, sun-baked metal handle with all our body weight, and wait for the icy, crystal-clear artesian water to gush out. We did not have personal, sterilized plastic water bottles. Instead, we drank directly from our dirty hands or placed our mouths right under the heavy iron spout. We shared the exact same stream of water with every kid in the neighbourhood, with passing factory workers, and sometimes even with the local stray dogs who waited for the puddles. There was no fear of bacteria, no warning signs about sanitation, just the purest, most refreshing water imaginable splashing onto our dusty sandals. Today, public health regulations would likely deem such shared, unmonitored drinking sources a massive hygiene hazard. Yet, somehow, that icy water from the blue well tasted better than any expensive, bottled mountain spring water sold in supermarkets today, quenching a thirst we can only dream of now. Think back to the magnificent, terrifying playgrounds nestled between the towering panel housing estates. There was no soft, recycled rubber flooring to cushion our falls, only solid, unforgiving concrete or hard-packed earth. Rising from the ground were colossal metal climbing frames shaped like rockets, globes, or abstract geometric puzzles. In the peak of summer, the thick layers of red and yellow paint would bake in the sun, turning the metal bars scalding hot to the touch. We climbed to dizzying heights, swinging completely upside down, entirely unsupervised. When we inevitably slipped and fell, scraping our knees raw on the concrete, there were no lawsuits and no panicked emergency calls. We simply brushed the dirt off our bleeding knees, held back our tears, and climbed right back up. Today, modern safety inspectors would immediately condemn those towering metal rockets as extreme hazards, replacing them with low plastic structures designed to prevent any possible injury. But those dangerous metal frames taught us resilience, balance, and the natural consequences of our actions. We learned how to be brave, and we learned that a scraped knee was just a small, necessary price to pay for the ultimate thrill of touching the sky. Let us remember the absolute innocence of hitchhiking across the country. Picture a teenager standing on the dusty shoulder of Highway 7, holding a torn piece of cardboard with the word "Sure-fuck" written on it in thick black marker. Back then, getting into a stranger's car was not the plot of a terrifying movie. It was a highly practical, culturally accepted way to travel. You would wait under the shade of a poplar tree until a family in a Lada or a friendly truck driver in an Iafa would pull over. You would hop in, share stories, laugh, and sometimes even share sandwiches wrapped in paper napkins with people you had never met before. The journey was built on a profound foundation of mutual trust. Today, the world has grown infinitely more cautious. Hitchhiking is strictly forbidden on many roads, and the very thought of letting a child or young adult step into a stranger's vehicle fills modern parents with absolute dread. We have lost that beautiful, naive faith in the goodness of strangers on the road. We miss the thrill of the unknown, the spontaneous conversations, and the deeply comforting feeling that anywhere you wanted to go, your fellow citizens would kindly help you get there. Can you smell the dense blue cloud of cigarette smoke filling the air of the yellow Icarus bus? In those days, smoking was an inescapable, completely normal part of the public atmosphere. People smoked absolutely everywhere. On the green train carriages of the MAV, in the busy Utasalato restaurants at the railway stations, in post offices, and even in the waiting rooms of local hospitals. The scent of cheap tobacco was permanently embedded into the heavy winter coats of our fathers and the velvet upholstery of the train seats. Every table had a glass ashtray, and a long journey was always measured by the number of cigarettes consumed. Today, lighting a cigarette in a closed public space, let alone on a bus or in a hospital, is strictly illegal and socially condemned. We now enjoy clean, filtered air on our travels, which is undeniably better for our health. Yet, looking back, that haze of smoke is inextricably linked to the memories of heated political debates over strong espresso, the sound of a struck match cutting through the silence of a train cabin, and a time when personal habits were woven seamlessly into the chaotic, shared fabric of daily public life. There was a specific, unforgettable scent that defined the month of October. It was the rich, earthy, slightly sweet smell of burning autumn leaves. When the leaves fell in thick, golden carpets across the gardens, every family would gather them into massive piles. As dusk approached, small fires would be lit in courtyards and along the ditches of every village and suburban street. The entire neighborhood would be wrapped in a thick, fragrant white blanket of smoke. Neighbors would lean casually on their wooden rakes, chatting over the wire fences, exchanging gossip while the bonfires crackled softly in the twilight. We children would jump over the smoldering embers, roasting chestnuts or small potatoes wrapped in foil. Today, this beautiful autumn ritual is strictly banned in almost every municipality due to environmental regulations and air quality control. The leaves are now quietly bagged into plastic sacks and taken away by modern garbage trucks. The air is cleaner, yes, but we have lost that magical, smoky evening ritual that brought entire streets together, signaling the slow, cozy transition into the cold winter months. Let us journey to a freezing winter dawn, the time of the traditional Dishnóvágás, the domestic pig slaughter. It was a monumental event that mobilized the entire extended family and neighborhood. The morning began before the sun even rose with a warming shot of homemade plum palinka to fight the biting cold. The air soon filled with the intense smells of scorched hair, boiling water, sweet onions, and rich red paprika. By afternoon, the courtyard was a factory of fresh sausages, hurka, and cured bacon. What makes this unimaginable today is that this freshly butchered meat was freely shared, gifted, and sometimes sold among neighbors without a single health inspector, sterile environment, or government stamp of approval. Today, strict food safety regulations and European hygiene laws dictate how meat must be processed, tracked, and refrigerated. The raw, messy, beautiful community effort of making food from scratch in a freezing backyard is becoming a rare, heavily regulated luxury. But nothing sold in modern, sterile plastic packaging will ever taste as incredibly rich and full of love as the warm, spiced sausage handed over the fence by a tired but smiling neighbor. Remember the heavy metal key hanging on a long string around your neck? That key was the ultimate symbol of a free childhood. During the long summer holidays, children as young as 6 or 7 were completely left to their own devices. We would leave the panel apartment early in the morning, carrying nothing but a thick slice of fresh bread smeared with lard and sprinkled with red paprika, the legendary sírós. We roamed the streets, explored abandoned construction sites, waded through nearby creeks, and built secret fortresses in the bushes. There were no mobile phones to track our locations, no scheduled playdates, and no adult supervision. The only rule was to be home when the streetlights flickered on. Today, leaving a young child to wander a city unsupervised for 12 hours is considered profound negligence, and Child Protective Services would quickly be involved. We live in an age of constant surveillance and anxiety, but that unsupervised freedom gave us incredible problem-solving skills, deep independence, and an intimate, tactile knowledge of every single tree, crack in the sidewalk, and hidden corner of our beloved neighborhoods. There was a strange, almost magical fascination hidden inside the family medicine cabinet. The classic glass mercury thermometer. When one of these delicate glass tubes inevitably slipped from a hand and shattered on the wooden parquet floor, it did not trigger a toxic materials evacuation. Instead, it became an impromptu, mesmerizing game. We would kneel on the floor and watch the brilliant, perfectly round silver beads of liquid mercury scatter across the room. With our bare fingers, we would push the tiny droplets together, watching them swallow each other to form larger, heavy silver pools. It felt like playing with alien technology. We had absolutely no idea that mercury vapor was a dangerous neurotoxin. Today, a broken mercury thermometer is treated as a serious, hazardous waste spill, requiring special cleanup kits, ventilation, and extreme caution. Their sale has been completely banned for years. Looking back, it is almost comical how casually we handled such toxic substances. Yet that innocent, dangerous curiosity, playing with liquid metal on a Sunday afternoon, remains one of the most vivid and surreal tactile memories of our childhood. Do you remember the intense, competitive spirit of the school paper and iron collection drives, the famous papiergütig? Once or twice a year, elementary school children became relentless scavengers. We would find old, creaky wooden carts and drag them through the cobblestone streets, knocking bravely on the doors of complete strangers. We asked for old newspapers, magazines, and rusty metal parts. We climbed up into dark, dusty attics and down into damp cellars, hauling out bundles of old Nepsabarchag newspapers tied with rough twine. We roamed the city streets for hours, hauling incredibly heavy loads, driven by the fierce pride of winning the class competition. Today, the idea of sending 8-year-olds to knock on strangers' doors, entering unfamiliar homes, and dragging dangerous scrap metal through traffic is utterly unthinkable due to strict child safety and labor laws. Recycling is now a sterile municipal service. But those exhausting days taught us the value of hard work, teamwork, and gave us an unmatched sense of purpose and belonging to our school community, all while smelling intensely of old paper and rust. Let us feel the wind rushing through our hair as we speed down a steep hill on a heavy, robust Chapel bicycle. The rhythmic clicking of the spokes and the rattle of the metal chain were the soundtracks of our afternoons. We rode everywhere, over dirt paths, cracked sidewalks, and busy roads. But what was completely missing from this picture? Helmets, knee pads, elbow guards, reflective vests. We rode with entirely bare heads and scraped knees, wearing just shorts and flimsy sandals. The concept of wearing a protective helmet to ride a bicycle was totally unheard of. If you fell and hit your head, you cried, your mother put a cold compress on it, and you got back on the saddle the next day. Today, riding without safety gear is considered extremely dangerous and in many places illegal for minors. Parents would be horrified to see their children racing down a rocky path entirely unprotected. We traded that raw, unshielded connection to the wind and the road for safety. While fewer heads are bumped today, we deeply miss that absolute, unprotected thrill of flying down the street, feeling totally invincible on two wheels. Can you hear the rhythmic, energetic clinking of a metal spoon rapidly beating against the sides of a porcelain mug? That was the sound of a beloved afternoon treat being prepared. We would take a completely raw egg yolk, add a generous heap of coarse crystal sugar, and stir it furiously until it transformed into a pale yellow, incredibly thick and sweet cream. We called it kogelmogel. It was the ultimate inexpensive dessert, made in seconds. We ate this raw egg mixture with absolute delight, scraping the bottom of the mug for every last sugary drop. Today, the mere thought of feeding raw, unpasteurized eggs to children sends modern parents into a panic about salmonella and bacterial infections. Nutritional guidelines strongly forbid the consumption of raw eggs. This simple, sugary delight from our kitchens has been entirely erased from modern childhoods. Yet in our memories, that sweet, velvety texture remains a symbol of a time when food was simple, resources were scarce, and a little bit of sugar and an egg could create a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness in a modest kitchen. Think back to a hot summer day in the sprawling asphalt parking lot of a Scala Coupe department store. Your parents had to go inside to buy clothes or hardware, a task that could take hours. Instead of dragging a bored child through the crowded aisles, the solution was incredibly simple. They left you in the car. You would sit in the back of the Dacia or Skoda, the windows rolled down just a crack, while the interior baked in the afternoon sun. You spent the time pretending to drive, playing with the steering wheel and watching the people walk by. It was totally normal and nobody batted an eye. Today, leaving a child unattended in a vehicle is a serious crime. Bystanders will smash the windows, call the police, and the parents will face severe legal consequences. The world has rightfully recognized the dangers of heat stroke and abduction. But the fact that our parents could leave us in a car, absolutely confident that we would be perfectly safe and undisturbed by the community around us, speaks to an era of profound societal trust that has completely vanished from our modern, anxiety-ridden lives. Let us step into the intimidating office of the school doctor or the local medical clinic. The smell of rubbing alcohol and iodine hung heavy in the air, but the sound that truly struck fear into our young hearts was the terrifying clatter of metal and glass boiling in a small water sterilizer. Back then, syringes were not made of cheap plastic wrapped in sterile paper meant to be used once and thrown away. They were heavy, thick glass cylinders with metal plungers and thick, reusable metal needles. After every injection, the nurse would simply disassemble the glass syringe, drop it into boiling water to sterilize it, and use it again on the next patient. Today, the use of reusable needles and glass syringes in a standard clinic is a massive violation of strict medical protocols due to the fear of blood-borne diseases. Everything now is single-use, disposable, and wrapped in plastic. But those heavy glass syringes, boiling away on a metal tray, remind us of a tougher time, an era where materials were precious, and we were taught to face pain and discomfort with a quiet, resilient bravery. Remember the incredibly loud window-rattling explosions echoing through the neighborhoods around Easter time? This was the era of homemade carbide cannons. Teenage boys would acquire chunks of calcium carbide, place them inside empty metal paint cans, add a little spit or water to start a chemical reaction, and quickly hammer the lid shut. As the pungent, awful smell of acetylene gas built up inside, Someone would hold a long burning stick to a small hole punched in the can. The resulting explosion was deafening, shooting the metal lid high into the sky. It was incredibly dangerous, completely unregulated, and thrilling. Today, manufacturing homemade explosives in a residential neighborhood would result in the immediate arrival of anti-terror police units and serious criminal charges. Fireworks safety is strictly controlled by law. We look back and realize how easily we could have lost a finger or an eye.
But that explosive, rebellious creativity, boys experimenting with dangerous chemistry in empty lots, was a vibrant, untamed part of growing up that modern safety rules have completely extinguished. Let us take a seat on a slow-moving, crowded train heading toward the countryside.
As lunchtime approached, families would reach into their vinyl bags and pull out their provisions. The most wonderful part was how the food was wrapped. A whole roasted chicken, thick slices of greasy bacon, or heavily paprika-spiced sausages were wrapped tightly in yesterday's Népszabadság or local daily newspaper. The grease would slowly seep through the thin paper, making the crossword puzzle transparent. The entire train cabin would fill with the rich, heavy aroma of garlic, fat, and roasted meat. We ate with our hands, wiping the grease on paper napkins, sharing bites with the people sitting across from us. Today, health codes and food packaging laws require sterile, food-grade plastics and containers. Wrapping greasy food in newspaper ink, which contains lead and toxic chemicals, is recognized as a terrible health hazard.
Yet, somehow, a piece of roasted chicken eaten directly from a grease-stained newspaper on a rattling train tasted like the ultimate feast, a deeply nostalgic flavor of travel and family togetherness. There was a deeply ingrained, unspoken rule in the courtyards of the panel buildings: the absolute authority of the neighborhood adults. If you misbehaved, if you threw stones at a window, or if you spoke disrespectfully to an elder, you did not just face the wrath of your own parents. Any grandmother sitting on a bench, any neighbor walking by, had the full moral authority to loudly scold you, grab your ear, or even give you a swift, corrective slap on the back of the head. And the most amazing part? If you went home crying to your mother, she would not sue the neighbor. She would likely discipline you again for causing trouble in the first place. Today, touching or disciplining someone else's child is legally classified as assault, a boundary that is fiercely protected. We fiercely guard our children's personal space now. But the disappearance of that shared authority also means the loss of a village mentality. Back then, every adult on the street felt a deep, shared responsibility to help raise you into a decent human being, weaving a tight web of community discipline. Do you recall the astonishing sights on the highways during the summer holiday season? Families determined to camp at the lake or visit relatives would pack their tiny cars to the absolute limit. We would strap massive canvas tents, heavy folding chairs, bicycles, and sometimes even pieces of wooden furniture to the flimsy metal roof racks of a tiny Polski Fiat or Trabant. We used cheap twine, old leather belts, and sheer hope to tie it all down. The car would sway dangerously on the winding roads of the Matra Mountains, the roof groaning under the immense, completely unsecured weight. Today, strict road safety laws and highway patrols heavily penalize insecure loads, requiring specialized, crash-tested roof boxes and professional tension straps. A car packed like ours would be pulled off the road immediately for endangering public safety. But those precarious, overpacked little cars were symbols of our immense determination to travel and enjoy life, no matter how limited our resources were. It was a triumph of willpower over physics, a chaotic ballet on the summer highways. Finally, let us remember the morning arrival of the milk. Before the sun was high, you might take an aluminum can down to a local farm or wait for the milkman's cart on the street. The milk we bought was poured straight from large metal churns. It was raw, unpasteurized cow's milk, still holding the faint, warm smell of the barn and the sweet hay. When you brought it home and let it sit in the cold pantry, a thick, luxurious layer of yellow cream would rise to the top, so thick you could spread it on bread. Today, selling raw unpasteurized milk is heavily restricted or entirely illegal in many places due to the severe risks of listeria and harmful bacteria. The milk we buy now is sterilized, homogenized, skimmed and sealed in Tetra Paks, stripped of its original, robust character to ensure a long shelf life.
We have gained absolute safety in our food supply, but we have forever lost that incredibly rich, unadulterated, pure taste of nature. That warm, creamy milk was not just a drink. It was a direct, tactile connection to the earth and the animals that sustained us. As we look back at these 20 ordinary things from the 1970s and 80s, a profound realization settles in our hearts. We do not genuinely miss the danger of the metal playgrounds, the toxic mercury, or the lack of seatbelts. What we truly, deeply miss is the immense unspoken trust we had in each other and the world around us. We miss a time when life felt less regulated, when communities raised children together, and when freedom meant stepping out the door with a key around your neck and the whole day ahead of you. We survived those beautifully chaotic times, and they shaped us into the resilient, strong generation we are today. If this journey back in time brought a smile to your face or a tear to your eye, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like, so we can continue to preserve these precious memories together. And now, I would love to hear from you.
Which of these forbidden things was your absolute favorite childhood memory? Please, share your personal stories in the comments below, and let us remember the magic of our youth together.